The blood-red sun hung low in the Montana sky as Aurora Morgan rode her chestnut mare over the ridge into Sloan, her body aching with each step the horse took. Dust billowed around her, clinging to her worn dress and settling in the creases of her weathered face. At 26, she looked a decade older, hardened by experiences no woman should ever endure. The year was 1875, and Sloan was barely more than a collection of wooden structures straddling the stagecoach route. Aurora had chosen it precisely for its obscurity. Nobody would think to look for her here, so far from the life she'd fled in St. Louis. She guided her horse toward the only establishment showing signs of life, the Watering Hole Saloon. Men's voices and piano music spilled from its swinging doors into the fading daylight. Aurora hesitated before dismounting. She hadn't been around this many people in months, preferring the solitude of her journey west. But she needed food, information, and if possible, work. The piano fell silent as she pushed through the doors. Conversations died mid-sentence as all eyes turned to assess the newcomer. Aurora kept her gaze fixed on the bartender, ignoring the stares that followed her across the room. "What can I get you, miss?" the bartender asked, eyeing her dust-covered appearance. "Water, please." "And information about work in this town." Her voice came out rougher than she'd intended, rusty from disuse. The bartender slid a glass across the counter. "Ain't much for a woman here cept cooking or laundering, or—" His eyes flicked meaningfully toward the stairs leading to the upper rooms. "I'll take the cooking or laundering," Aurora replied firmly, taking a sip of water. A deep voice spoke from behind her. "Mrs. Peterson at the boarding house was saying yesterday she could use help with cooking and cleaning." Aurora turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with broad shoulders. His sandy hair was slightly too long, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a face tanned by years under the sun. Unlike the other patrons, his eyes held no lascivious intent, just a straightforward helpfulness that nonetheless made her uncomfortable. She wasn't accustomed to kindness without strings attached. "Thank you," she said curtly, turning back to her water. "Name's Finn Vance," he continued, undeterred by her coldness. "I work the Double Circle Ranch north of town. Mrs. Peterson's place is the white house at the end of Main Street. Can't miss it." Aurora nodded without looking at him again. "Much obliged." She could feel Finn Vance hovering for a moment longer before he retreated to a table in the corner with several other men who looked to be ranch hands. She finished her water quickly, paid the bartender, and left without another glance in the cowboy's direction. The boarding house was exactly where Finn had indicated. Mrs. Peterson, a plump, gray-haired widow in her 60s, welcomed Aurora with surprising warmth. "Heavens, child, you look dead on your feet," the older woman exclaimed, ushering her inside. "When's the last time you had a proper meal?" Aurora couldn't remember. "I can pay for a room," she said instead of answering. "And I heard you might need help with cooking and cleaning." Mrs. Peterson studied her for a long moment. "I do indeed. And judging by the look of you, you could use a safe place to stay." "Don't worry about telling me what brought you here. Plenty of folks come west to outrun something." Relief washed over Aurora. "Thank you," she whispered. "Room's yours for as long as you work for me. We can discuss wages tomorrow after you've rested. For now, let me show you upstairs and bring you some stew." Later, bathed and fed for the first time in days, Aurora stood at the window of her small room, watching as workers from the saloon and stores headed home. She spotted Finn Vance among a group of cowboys mounting horses at the hitching post. Something about his easy confidence, the way the other men deferred to him, suggested he was more than just another hand. A cold knot formed in her stomach. Men with authority had never been kind in her experience. She would need to be careful around him. For the next 2 weeks, Aurora settled into a routine at the boarding house. She cooked breakfast for the permanent residents, a shopkeeper, the town's schoolteacher, and an elderly man who once prospected for gold. She cleaned rooms, washed linens, and helped Mrs. Peterson prepare evening meals. The work was hard but honest, and Mrs. Peterson proved to be a fair employer who respected Aurora's desire for privacy. The older woman never pressed for details about Aurora's past, though her knowing eyes sometimes followed Aurora when she flinched at sudden movements or startled at loud noises. It was a Thursday when Finn Vance returned to town. Aurora was hanging sheets on the line behind the boarding house when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She tensed instinctively, backing toward the house door. Finn reined his horse to a stop at the fence. "Afternoon, Miss Morgan," he called, tipping his hat. "Mrs. Peterson mentioned you'd taken the position here." Aurora nodded stiffly, keeping her distance. "Mr. Vance. Ranch is hosting a social gathering Saturday next. Boss likes to do it every spring. Whole town's invited." He paused, then added, "Thought you might like to know, being new to Sloan and all." "Thank you for the information," she replied, her tone making it clear she had no intention of attending. Finn studied her for a moment. "Not much for socializing, are you? I prefer my own company." He nodded, a hint of understanding in his eyes that unsettled her. "Well, the invitation stands if you change your mind. Double circle's about 5 miles north. Can't miss it." As he turned his horse to leave, Aurora felt a strange mixture of relief and something else she couldn't quite name. She returned to hanging sheets with more force than necessary, angry at herself for even noticing the kindness in his eyes. That evening, Mrs. Peterson mentioned the gathering over dinner. "You should consider going, dear. It would do you good to meet more folks in town." "I'm not one for parties," Aurora said, pushing food around her plate. "The double circle does a fine spread. And Finn Vance is a good man. He's the foreman there, you know. Started as a hand 10 years ago and worked his way up." Aurora kept her expression neutral. "I've met many men who appeared good at first glance." Mrs. Peterson's eyes softened. "Yes, I expect you have. But Finn's different. Lost his wife and baby in childbirth about 5 years back. Threw himself into his work after that. Never seen him pay attention to a woman since until he started asking about you." Aurora's head snapped up. "Asking what?" "Nothing improper," Mrs. Peterson assured her. "Just whether you were settling in all right. Seemed concerned is all." "I don't need his concern," Aurora said sharply. "Or anyone else's," Mrs. Peterson sighed. "We all need someone to care, Aurora, sooner or later." Aurora didn't respond, but that night, her dreams were haunted by memories her father's gambling debts, her marriage at 17 to a man 30 years her senior to settle those debts, the years of abuse that followed, and finally, her desperate escape when she learned he planned to share her with his business associates. She woke gasping, her nightdress soaked with sweat. No, she thought fiercely. She didn't need anyone's care. Caring led to control, and control led to pain. She'd learned that lesson thoroughly. The Saturday of the gathering arrived with perfect spring weather. Despite her resolution to stay away, Aurora found herself restless as she watched townspeople in their finest clothes heading north toward the double circle. Mrs. Peterson had gone early to help with preparations, leaving Aurora alone at the boarding house. By mid-afternoon, she'd cleaned every surface twice and reorganized the pantry. With nothing left to occupy her hands, her mind kept returning to Finn Vance's invitation. Not the man himself, she told herself firmly, just the chance to see more of the country beyond Sloan's dusty streets. Before she could talk herself out of it, Aurora changed into her one good dress, a simple blue cotton with small white flowers embroidered at the collar. She brushed out her long auburn hair, weaving it into a single braid, and borrowed Mrs. Peterson's gentle mare for the ride. The Double Circle Ranch sprawled across a picturesque valley, its main house larger than Aurora had expected, with a wide porch and several outbuildings nearby. A barn had been cleared for dancing, lanterns hung from rafters though they weren't yet lit in the afternoon sun. Tables laden with food stood under canvas awnings, and children ran laughing between clusters of adults. Aurora tied her horse at the edge of the gathering, already regretting her decision. She didn't belong here, among these people with their easy laughter and simple lives. She was about to mount up again when a familiar voice called her name. "Miss Morgan, you decided to come after all." Finn Vance approached, looking different in clean clothes, a white shirt, dark vest, and black pants that emphasized his height and the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was neatly combed, his beard trimmed closer than when she'd last seen him. "I was just leaving," Aurora said, one hand on the saddle. Without even trying Mrs. Peterson's apple pie, she'd be heartbroken. His smile was gentle, with no hint of mockery. "Stay, at least for a while." No need to talk to anyone if you don't want to. Something in his expression, a loneliness that mirrored her own, perhaps made her hesitate. I don't dance, she said finally. Neither do I, not anymore. A shadow crossed his face before he gestured toward the tables. But I do eat. Come have some food, at least. Aurora reluctantly followed him, acutely aware of curious glances from the townspeople. Finn led her to a table somewhat removed from the main crowd and filled a plate with food before stepping back. I'll leave you be, he said, seeming to understand her discomfort with his proximity. But I'm glad you came, Miss Morgan. As he walked away to greet other guests, Aurora found herself watching him the easy way he had with people, the respect in their eyes when they spoke to him. He moved with a quiet confidence she'd rarely seen in men, who usually felt the need to announce their importance loudly. She ate slowly, observing the community around her. Despite her isolation, she found herself envying their connections, the way they fit together like pieces of a well-worn puzzle. It had been so long since she'd belonged anywhere. The afternoon mellowed into evening. Lanterns were lit, casting warm golden light over the proceedings. A fiddle struck up a lively tune, and couples began to dance in the barn. Aurora remained at her table, declining several invitations from townsmen with firm politeness. She was about to slip away when Finn appeared again, carrying 2 cups of punch. Thought you might be thirsty, he said, offering one to her. Thank you. She accepted it cautiously. Your ranch is impressive. Not mine, I just work here. The owner, Mr. Hollister, stays in Helena most of the time, leaves the running of things to me. He settled on the bench across from her, careful to leave plenty of space between them. You've been with Mrs. Peterson for a few weeks now. How are you finding Sloan? It's quiet, I like that. Finn nodded, understanding in his eyes. Came here seeking peace myself years back, Mrs. Peterson mentioned you lost your wife, Aurora said, then immediately regretted the personal question. Pain flashed across his face, but he answered evenly. 5 years ago, Catherine and our son William, he lived less than an hour. I'm sorry, Aurora said softly and meant it. Some wounds heal slower than others. He looked toward the dancers, then back at her. What about you, Miss Morgan? What brought you to Sloan? Aurora stiffened. A desire for a fresh start. Fair enough. Finn didn't press further, and they sat in surprisingly comfortable silence as twilight deepened into night. Later, when most families had departed and only the younger folks remained for dancing, Aurora finally rose to leave. Finn walked her to her horse, keeping a respectful distance. Thank you for coming tonight, he said as she mounted. Perhaps I'll see you in town sometime. Aurora nodded, unsure how to respond to his continued kindness. Good night, Mr. Vance. Finn, he corrected gently. Most folks just call me Finn. She hesitated, then inclined her head. Good night, Finn. As she rode back toward town under a star-filled sky, Aurora realized she'd spent more time in Finn Vance's company than in any man since her escape. More surprisingly, she hadn't felt afraid, wary, yes, but not terrified as she usually was around men. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt significant after so long living in fear. Spring deepened into summer, and Aurora's life in Sloan settled into a comfortable pattern. Mrs. Peterson proved to be not just an employer but a friend, teaching Aurora to make her famous pies and sharing stories of her own journey west as a young bride 30 years earlier. Aurora saw Finn occasionally when he came to town for supplies or to deliver messages. Each time, he would tip his hat and exchange a few words, never pushing for more conversation than she offered. Gradually, she found herself looking forward to these brief interactions, though she tried to deny it even to herself. One sweltering July afternoon, Aurora was returning from the general store with supplies when she heard angry voices from the alley beside the saloon. A man's threatening tone followed by a woman's frightened protest made her freeze. Without thinking, she set down her packages and moved closer. A saloon girl was backed against the wall, tears streaming down her face as a red-faced, heavy-set man loomed over her, one hand gripping her arm painfully. You're hurting me, Mr. Jenkins, the girl sobbed. She couldn't have been more than 18. You took my money happy enough, the man snarled. Now you'll deliver what you promised. Aurora's heart raced with fear, but memories of her own helplessness spurred her forward. Let her go, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Jenkins turned, momentarily surprised. Mind your own business, lady, she said. You're hurting her. That makes it my business. The man laughed, ugly and mean. Well, look at the high and mighty help from the boarding house. You want to take her place. He moved toward Aurora, releasing the saloon girl, who immediately fled toward the street. Aurora backed away, suddenly realizing her dangerous position alone with this drunken stranger. I said, mind your own business, Jenkins repeated, advancing on her. Aurora's back hit the wall of the building. Panic surged through her as memories overlapped with the present. Another man, another wall, another moment of helplessness. Suddenly, Jenkins was yanked backward, lifted almost off his feet by a powerful grip on his collar. Finn Vance slammed the man against the opposite wall, forearm pressed across his throat. Touch either of those women again, Finn said in a low, deadly voice, and you'll be leaving Sloan in a pine box. Are we clear? Jenkins, face purpling, nodded frantically. Finn released him with a disgusted shove. Get out of my sight. The man staggered away, coughing and cursing under his breath. Finn turned to Aurora, concern etched on his features. Are you hurt? She shook her head, trying to control her trembling. The girl, Molly's safe. She ran straight to the sheriff. He took a step toward her, then stopped when she flinched. You were brave to intervene. Aurora laughed bitterly. I was foolish. What could I have done against him? You did plenty. Molly got away because of you. His eyes studied her face. Not many folks would risk themselves for a saloon girl. No one helped me when I needed it, she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Understanding dawned in Finn's eyes, but he asked no questions. Instead, he bent to gather the packages she'd abandoned. Let me walk you back to the boarding house. They walked in silence through the dusty street, keeping a careful distance between them. At the boarding house steps, Finn handed over her packages. Thank you, Aurora said quietly, for intervening. Some men don't deserve the name, Finn replied. He hesitated, then added, not all of us are like that, Aurora. It was the first time he'd used her given name. She met his eyes briefly before looking away. Perhaps not, but enough are. She retreated inside, heart racing from more than just the confrontation in the alley. Finn's presence had awakened something she'd thought long dead, a dangerous spark of interest, of possibility. She couldn't afford such feelings. They led only to vulnerability, and vulnerability led to pain. That night, the nightmares returned with vengeance. Aurora woke screaming, thrashing against phantom hands. Mrs. Peterson came running, holding her until the shaking subsided. You're safe here, child, the older woman murmured. No one can hurt you now. Aurora pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. No one is ever truly safe, Mrs. Peterson sighed sadly. What happened to make you believe that? Perhaps it was the lingering terror of the nightmare or the kindness in the older woman's eyes, but Aurora found herself speaking of things she'd never shared aloud. Her father's gambling. Her marriage at 17 to Horace Morgan, a business associate 3 decades her senior. The years of abuse disguised as a respectable marriage. Her final desperate escape when she overheard Horace's plans to entertain his friends with her. I traveled for months, she finished, voice hoarse from talking. Always looking over my shoulder, taking odd jobs, moving on before anyone asked too many questions. I had nearly run out of money when I reached Sloan. Mrs. Peterson wiped tears from her weathered cheeks. Oh, my dear girl. No wonder you keep everyone at arm's length. He might still be looking for me, Aurora whispered. He's a proud man. He wouldn't accept being defied. Montana Territory is a long way from St. Louis, Mrs. Peterson said firmly, and you have friends here now, whether you want them or not. Aurora smiled weakly. You've been very kind to me, not just me. Mrs. Peterson gave her a knowing look. Finn Vance has taken quite an interest in your welfare. Aurora looked away. He shouldn't. I have nothing to offer anyone. Nonsense. You have a brave heart and a strong spirit, despite everything you've endured. Don't let that monster steal your future as well as your past. The words echoed in Aurora's mind long after Mrs. Peterson had returned to her own room. A future it seemed an impossible luxury when she'd spent so long just trying to survive the present. August brought scorching days and the annual Sloan Founders' Day celebration. The entire town gathered in the newly constructed town hall for a dance and potluck dinner. Mrs. Peterson insisted Aurora attend, overriding her objections with gentle determination. "You've been hiding away too long," the older woman said as she helped Aurora arrange her hair. "It's time to start living again, not just existing." Aurora wore her blue dress again, freshly washed and pressed. Mrs. Peterson had added white lace to the collar and cuffs, transforming the simple garment into something almost pretty. Looking at her reflection, Aurora barely recognized herself. The haunted look in her eyes had softened, and regular meals had restored some fullness to her face. The town hall buzzed with activity when they arrived. Tables groaned under the weight of food, and a four-piece band tuned their instruments in the corner. Aurora helped Mrs. Peterson arrange her famous pies on the dessert table, then retreated to a quiet spot along the wall. She was watching children play a game of tag outside the open doors when Finn appeared beside her. He looked handsome in a clean white shirt and dark vest, his hair neatly combed back from his forehead. "Evening, Aurora," he said, his voice warm. "Mrs. Peterson said you'd be here tonight." "She didn't give me much choice," Aurora replied, but without real annoyance. Finn smiled. "She can be persuasive when she sets her mind to something." He glanced toward the band as they began a lively tune. "Would you care to dance?" Aurora tensed. "I told you before I don't dance." "Don't or can't?" he asked gently. "Both," she admitted. "My husband never allowed it, said it was improper for his wife to dance with other men and he didn't care for it himself." Anger flashed in Finn's eyes, quickly controlled. "Well, he's not here and I'm asking properly." "But I understand if you'd rather not." Aurora studied him, this man who had shown her nothing but respect and patience over the months she'd been in Sloan. Perhaps Mrs. Peterson was right. Maybe it was time to start reclaiming pieces of her life. "I might step on your toes," she warned. "I've never properly learned." Finn's smile lit his entire face. "I'll risk it." He led her to the edge of the dance floor, positioning himself carefully to shield her from most of the crowd's view. "Just follow my lead," he said, placing one hand lightly at her waist and taking her hand with the other. Aurora tensed at the contact, then forced herself to relax. This was Finn, not Horace. He moved slowly, giving her time to follow his steps. After a few minutes of concentration, she found herself actually enjoying the music and movement. "See, you're a natural," Finn said as she successfully navigated a turn. "Hardly," she replied, but she was smiling, a real smile that reached her eyes. They danced 2 more songs before Aurora needed a rest. Finn fetched them both punch and they stood near an open window, catching the slight evening breeze. "Thank you," Aurora said quietly, "for being patient with me." "No need for thanks. I've enjoyed getting to know you these past months." Aurora hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered in her mind. "Why? I've been nothing but cold to you." Finn considered her question seriously. "I recognized something in you that first day, a kind of wariness I understood. After Catherine died, I didn't want to be around people either. Grief and pain can make you build walls." "I'm sorry about your wife," Aurora said softly. "Mrs. Peterson said you loved her very much." "I did." His eyes grew distant. "We grew up together in Kansas, childhood sweethearts, married at 19. When she died, I thought that part of my life was over for good." He looked at her directly. "Never thought I'd meet someone who made me reconsider." Aurora's heart hammered in her chest. "Finn, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know that, when you're ready, if you're ever ready, there's someone who sees your worth." Before she could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Sheriff Taylor was escorting a well-dressed stranger into the hall. The man was tall and lean, with silver at his temples and an expensive suit that marked him as an outsider. "Looking for someone," the sheriff was saying. "Thought folks here might be able to help." Cold dread washed over Aurora as the stranger surveyed the room. Though it had been over a year, she would know that calculating gaze anywhere Clayton Reed, her husband's business partner and closest friend. She shrank back against the wall, instinctively seeking shadows. Finn noticed her reaction immediately. "Aurora, what's wrong?" "That man," she whispered, barely able to form words through her terror. "He knows my husband. If he sees me." Understanding flashed in Finn's eyes. Without hesitation, he positioned himself to block her from view. "Side door," he murmured. "Can you slip out?" Aurora nodded, gathering her skirts. Don't let him see which way I went. I won't. Go to the double circle, not the boarding house. He'll check there first. Ask for Miguel at the bunkhouse. Tell him I sent you and to keep you hidden until I return." Heart pounding, Aurora slipped along the wall toward the side exit. She glanced back once to see Finn deliberately engaging Reed in conversation, drawing his attention away from her escape route. Gratitude surged through her as she slipped into the darkness. She ran until her lungs burned, then slowed to a quick walk, keeping to shadows. The double circle was 5 miles north, too far to walk quickly. Desperate, she turned toward the livery stable, praying the owner would be at the celebration. Luck was with her. The stable was deserted, the door secured with a simple latch. Aurora slipped inside, soothing the horses with quiet words as she located a saddle and bridle. She chose a sturdy bay, gelding, murmuring apologies as she tacked him up. "I'll return you soon," she promised, leading him outside before mounting. "Just need to borrow you for a while." The horse responded willingly to her commands, trotting north out of town. Once past the last buildings, Aurora urged him into a canter, bent low over his neck as they raced through the moonlit landscape. The double circle appeared after what seemed an eternity. Lights still burned in the bunkhouse despite the late hour. Aurora reined in at the hitching post, legs trembling as she dismounted. A Mexican man in his 40s emerged at the sound of hooves, rifle ready until he made out her figure in the moonlight. "Señorita, what brings you here so late?" "Are you Miguel?" When he nodded, she continued, "Finn Vance sent me. He said you should hide me until he returns." Miguel's expression grew serious. "Come inside, quickly." The bunkhouse was empty except for an older cowhand playing solitaire at her rough wooden table. Miguel exchanged rapid words with him in Spanish, then led Aurora to a small room off the main building. "Finn's quarters," he explained, lighting a lamp. "No one will disturb you here. Can you tell me what's happening?" Aurora sank onto a chair, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. "A man from my past found me, someone dangerous," Miguel nodded, asking no further questions. "Rest, I will watch for Finn." Left alone, Aurora surveyed the sparse room, a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a chest of drawers, a small bookshelf filled with well-worn volumes. A framed photograph on the wall showed a younger Finn beside a pretty woman with a gentle smile. Catherine, she realized, the wife he had loved and lost. Guilt washed over her. She was bringing danger to this good man's doorstep. Perhaps it would be better to keep running, to draw Reed away from Sloan and the people who had shown her kindness. She was still debating when hoofbeats approached at a gallop. Peering through the small window, she saw Finn dismounting from a lathered horse. Relief and fear warred within her as he strode toward the bunkhouse. Moments later, he entered the room, face tight with concern. "Are you all right?" Aurora nodded. "How did you find me so quickly?" Saw Reed talking to Mrs. Peterson, didn't wait to hear what she told him. He ran a hand through his hair, disheveled from his hard ride. "Aurora, who is this man? What does he want with you?" The time for half-truths was past. "Clayton Reed was my husband's business partner. They were involved in things, illegal things." She took a shaky breath. "When I fled St. Louis, I took ledgers from my husband's safe, proof of their crimes. It was my insurance. I thought if they found me, I could threaten to expose them." Finn's expression darkened. "What kind of crimes?" "Smuggling, bribery, I believe murder, though that was never explicitly recorded." She twisted her hands in her lap. "My husband trusted me to record transactions sometimes. He thought me too stupid and too afraid to understand what I was writing. And Reed has tracked you all the way to Montana. It appears so. He won't stop until he finds me in the ledgers." Finn paced the small room. "Where are they now?" "Hidden beneath a floorboard in my room at the boarding house." Aurora rose, determination replacing fear. "I need to leave tonight before he connects me to you or Mrs. Peterson. You've both been too kind to be drawn into my troubles." "No." Finn's voice was firm. "Running alone is what he'll expect. We need a different approach." Aurora stared at him. "This isn't your fight, Finn." He moved closer, stopping just short of touching her. "It became my fight the moment you came to Sloan. I care about what happens to you, Aurora." "More than I should, perhaps." The simple declaration stole her breath. "I'm nothing but trouble," she whispered. "Damaged goods." "No," Finn shook his head fiercely. "You're a survivor, stronger than you know." Aurora's eyes filled with tears. I'm afraid all the time, that's not strength. Being afraid and standing your ground anyway, that's the definition of courage. He hesitated, then slowly, telegraphing his movements, reached for her hand. When she didn't pull away, he clasped it gently. Let me help you face this. We'll go to the sheriff tomorrow with the ledgers. You don't understand, Aurora said desperately. Men like Reed and my husband have influence, money. They've bought judges and lawmen before. Sheriff Taylor's a good man, and Montana isn't St. Louis. Finn's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, the gentle touch making her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Trust me, Aurora, please. She looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity and something deeper that made her breath catch. Slowly, she nodded. All right. But if anything goes wrong, I'm leaving. I won't let anyone else be hurt because of me. Fair enough. Finn released her hand reluctantly. You should rest. Take my bed. I'll bunk with the hands. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. Finn paused at the door. We'll ride to town at first light. Try to sleep, Aurora. After he left, Aurora sank onto the narrow bed, inhaling the scent of pine soap and leather that clung to the pillow. Despite her fear, there was comfort in knowing she wasn't facing this alone anymore. For the first time since she'd fled St. Louis, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps there could be an end to running. Sleep came surprisingly easily, and dawn found her more rested than she'd expected. Finn had coffee and biscuits waiting when she emerged from his quarters. They ate quickly, then mounted fresh horses for the ride to town. Reed's staying at the hotel, Finn told her as they rode. Sheriff's keeping an eye on him. Aurora nodded, tension building as they approached Sloan. The town was just waking as they tied their horses behind the boarding house. Mrs. Peterson met them at the back door, relief washing over her face. Thank the Lord you're safe, she exclaimed, embracing Aurora. That man came asking questions last night. I told him I'd never heard of an Aurora Morgan. Thank you, Aurora said, returning the hug fiercely. I need to get something from my room, then we're going to the sheriff. The ledgers were untouched beneath the loose floorboard. Aurora wrapped them in a shawl and rejoined Finn and Mrs. Peterson in the kitchen. Be careful, Mrs. Peterson warned as they prepared to leave. That Reed fellow strikes me as dangerous. We will be, Finn promised. They were crossing to the sheriff's office when a familiar voice froze Aurora in her tracks. Well, Mrs. Morgan, what a coincidence finding you in this charming little settlement. Clayton Reed stood on the boardwalk, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. His thin smile never reached his cold eyes as he surveyed her. Finn stepped slightly in front of Aurora, his posture protective without being obvious. Can we help you, mister? Reed's gaze flicked dismissively over Finn. My business is with Mrs. Morgan, or should I say Mrs. Horace Morgan of St. Louis. Her husband is most anxious for her safe return. Aurora clutched the shawl wrapped ledgers tighter. My husband knows exactly why I left. A misunderstanding, I'm sure, Reed replied smoothly, one that could be resolved privately. His eyes hardened as he noticed the package she carried, along with the return of certain property you borrowed. There's nothing to discuss, Aurora said, finding strength in Finn's solid presence beside her. Please tell my husband I have no intention of returning to St. Louis. Reed's pleasant facade slipped. That's not your decision to make. A wife belongs with her husband. Not when that husband is abusive, Finn interjected, his voice dangerously quiet. Reed's eyes narrowed. And you are. Someone who believes a woman has the right to choose her own path, Finn replied evenly. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have business with the sheriff. He guided Aurora around Reed, keeping himself between them. They had nearly reached the sheriff's office when Reed called after them. Those ledgers won't help you, Aurora. No one will believe a hysterical woman over respected businessmen, and your cowboy friend here. He'll only get himself killed interfering in matters that don't concern him. Aurora faltered, fear for Finn overriding her own safety. Reed pressed his advantage, stepping closer. Be reasonable. Return what belongs to your husband and perhaps he'll be lenient. Continue this foolishness and I can't promise the safety of anyone who's helped you. Before either could respond, Sheriff Taylor emerged from his office, hand resting casually on his holstered revolver. Problem here, folks? Reed smoothed his features into a bland smile. Not at all, Sheriff. Just a family matter. Sounded like threats to me, Taylor said mildly. We don't much care for that in Sloan. A misunderstanding. Reed's eyes remained cold despite his smile. Mrs. Morgan is somewhat overwrought. Her husband sent me to escort her home. I'm not going anywhere with you, Aurora stated firmly. Sheriff Taylor studied the situation. Why don't you all come inside? Sounds like we've got some sorting out to do. In the sheriff's office, Aurora placed the ledgers on his desk with trembling hands. These are records of illegal activities conducted by my husband and Mr. Reed. Smuggling, bribery, possibly worse. Taylor unwrapped the ledgers, flipping through pages of meticulous accounting. His expression grew increasingly grave. These are serious accusations, Mrs. Morgan. Fabrications, Reed interjected smoothly. Mrs. Morgan has been unwell. Her husband has been beside himself with worry. I was never unwell, Aurora countered. Just afraid and trapped. My father lost our farm gambling and arranged my marriage to settle his debts. I was 17, Horace was 47. Her voice strengthened as she continued. For 8 years, I endured his correction when I displeased him. I fled when I overheard him arranging to share me with his business associates, including Mr. Reed. The sheriff's face hardened as he turned to Reed. That true? Preposterous, Reed scoffed, but a flush crept up his neck. As I said, she's unbalanced. These ledgers look mighty balanced to me, Taylor countered, tapping the open book. Names, dates, amounts. Federal authorities would find this interesting reading. Reed's composure cracked slightly. This is absurd. You have no jurisdiction over matters in Missouri. No, but I can wire the federal marshal in Helena. Seems to me smuggling across state lines falls under their authority. Taylor leaned back in his chair. Course, there's also the matter of threatening folks in my town that I definitely have jurisdiction over. Reed's eyes darted between them, calculating. You're making a serious mistake. Horace Morgan has powerful friends. So do I, Aurora said quietly, drawing strength from Finn's steady presence. People who believe in justice. A tense silence filled the room before Taylor spoke again. Mr. Reed, I'm placing you under arrest pending communication with federal authorities. Finn, mind helping me secure our guest? Reed's hand moved suddenly to his jacket. Finn reacted instantly, tackling him as a derringer appeared in Reed's grip. They crashed to the floor, struggling for control of the small pistol. A shot cracked in the confined space, deafeningly loud. Aurora screamed as both men went still. Then Finn pushed himself up, breathing hard, the derringer in his hand. Reed lay motionless, blood spreading across his expensive shirt. Finn, Aurora rushed to his side. Are you hurt? Just winded, he assured her, though he winced as he stood. The gun went off when we fell. Sheriff Taylor knelt beside Reed, checking for signs of life before shaking his head. He's gone. Bullet caught him straight in the heart. Aurora swayed, and Finn steadied her with an arm around her shoulders. It's over, he murmured. You're safe now. For how long? She whispered. Horace will send others when Reed doesn't return. Not if he's in prison, Taylor said, rising. These ledgers have enough evidence to put him away for years. I'll wire the federal marshal today and send copies to the St. Louis authorities. They won't believe me, Aurora said, remembering how often her complaints had been dismissed in the past. They'll believe these books, Taylor insisted. Numbers don't lie, and neither do federal agents when smuggling and bribery are involved. Aurora wanted desperately to believe him, but years of learned helplessness were difficult to overcome. Finn seemed to understand her doubt. One step at a time, he said gently. For now, you're safe in Sloan. The next few weeks passed in a blur of statements, telegrams, and waiting. The federal marshal arrived from Helena to collect Reed's body and the ledgers, promising to pursue the case against Horace Morgan with all possible speed. Aurora remained at the boarding house, jumping at every unexpected sound, expecting Horace or his agents to appear despite the sheriff's assurances. Finn visited daily, bringing news and quiet companionship that gradually became the highlight of her days. A month after Reed's death, a telegram arrived from St. Louis. Horace Morgan had been arrested along with several business associates. The evidence in the ledgers, combined with testimony from clerks eager to save themselves, had created an airtight case. It's really over, Aurora whispered, staring at the telegram in disbelief. Mrs. Peterson hugged her tightly. You're free, child, truly free. That evening, Aurora walked to the edge of town, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and purple. Finn found her there, approaching with the quiet respect he always showed. Heard the news, he said, stopping beside her. Congratulations. Thank you. Aurora turned to face him. For everything, I wouldn't have had the courage to stand my ground without you. You've always had courage, Finn countered. You survived years of hell and still found the strength to escape. That took incredible bravery. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue sky. What will you do now? Finn finally asked. Now that you're truly free. Aurora had been asking herself the same question. I'm not sure, I've never had choices before. Will you stay in Sloan? She heard the deeper question beneath his words. I'd like to, I've found peace here and friendship. She glanced at him, heart racing. Maybe more than friendship if I'm brave enough to reach for it. Finn's eyes softened. Aurora, I'm scared, she admitted, cutting him off. Not of you, of being vulnerable again. I know, he said simply. I was scared too after Catherine. Thought I'd never risk my heart again. What changed? She asked softly. You. He stepped closer, still careful not to crowd her. The way you faced your fears, your strength, your kindness that shows despite everything you've endured. Aurora felt tears welling in her eyes. I'm too damaged to love, she confessed, voicing her deepest fear. There are parts of me that might never heal completely. Finn reached slowly for her hand, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, he entwined their fingers gently. Then we'll heal together, the cowboy replied. Day by day, no rushing, no pressure, just two people walking the same path for as long as it feels right. A tear slipped down Aurora's cheek. You make it sound so simple. Not simple, he corrected, but worth trying. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I care for you, Aurora Morgan, more than I thought possible after losing Catherine. If you're willing to try, so am I. Aurora looked up at this man who had shown her nothing but respect and patience, who had risked his life to protect her, who understood loss and pain but hadn't let it harden his heart. I'd like that, she whispered. To try together. Finn's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, telegraphing his movements as always, he leaned down. Aurora's heart pounded, but she didn't pull away as his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. When they parted, Aurora felt something unfurling inside her, fragile and tentative, but unmistakably real. Not love, perhaps, not yet. But the possibility of it, the hope. One day at a time, Finn promised, his forehead resting lightly against hers. One day at a time, Aurora agreed. Fall painted the Montana landscape in brilliant gold and crimson as Aurora settled into her new life. With Horace safely imprisoned awaiting trial, the last of her fear gradually receded. She continued working for Mrs. Peterson, but also began helping at the school 2 afternoons a week, discovering a gift for teaching that brought unexpected joy. Her relationship with Finn progressed slowly, with careful respect on both sides. They rode together on Sundays, exploring the breathtaking countryside around Sloan. Sometimes they talked for hours, other times they simply enjoyed companionable silence. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, and in that patient space, Aurora found herself blooming like a flower turning toward the sun. The first time she visited the Double Circle Ranch properly, not as a fugitive, but as Finn's guest, she was struck by the beauty of the valley and the obvious respect the ranch hands showed their foreman. You've built a good life here, she observed as they sat on the porch after dinner. It's a good place to heal, Finn replied. Plenty of honest work and open spaces. He glanced at her. Room to breathe and figure things out. I can see why you stayed after Catherine died. Finn nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than pained at the mention of his late wife. For a while, I was just going through the motions. The work kept me sane when grief threatened to drown me. He reached for Aurora's hand, a gesture that had become familiar and comforting. Didn't think I'd find joy again, but here we are. As winter approached, Aurora made a decision. During Sunday dinner at Mrs. Peterson's, where Finn had become a regular guest, she cleared her throat nervously. I've been thinking, she began, about the future, my future. Mrs. Peterson and Finn both looked at her attentively. The school board has offered me a permanent position teaching the younger children, Aurora continued. I've accepted. That's wonderful news, Mrs. Peterson beamed. You have a gift with the little ones. There's more, Aurora said, gathering her courage. Part of my compensation includes the small cottage behind the school. I'll be moving there after Christmas. A flicker of something disappointment crossed Finn's face before he composed his features. Your own place, that's a big step. It is, Aurora agreed. My first home that's truly mine. She hesitated, then added softly, I was hoping. That is, I wondered if you might help me fix it up. The roof needs work, and some of the windows, yes, Finn said immediately, relief evident in his voice. Of course I will. Mrs. Peterson watched them with knowing eyes. Well, I'll miss having you here, Aurora, but it's time you had your own space, a place to build your future. The cottage renovation became a project that carried them through the winter months. Finn repaired the roof and windows, built new shelves and a sturdy table, while Aurora sewed curtains and saved for a proper cookstove. Other townspeople contributed Mrs. Peterson donated a patchwork quilt, the blacksmith's wife gave her seedlings for a spring garden, and the schoolchildren helped paint the fence. By early spring, the cottage had transformed from a neglected structure to a charming home. The night before Aurora was to move in, she and Finn stood in the freshly painted main room, surveying their work. Hard to believe it's the same place, Aurora marveled, turning slowly to take in the cozy space. You made it happen, Finn said, had the vision for it. We made it happen, she corrected, moving to stand before him. I couldn't have done it alone. In the months since their first kiss, physical affection between them had remained gentle and restrained hand-holding, brief kisses, an arm around shoulders. Both understood the shadows Aurora still carried, the memories that sometimes made her flinch from touch. But tonight, standing in the home they had created together, Aurora felt a different kind of courage stirring. She stepped closer, placing her hands on Finn's chest. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Finn's arms came around her slowly, giving her time to pull away if she needed. No thanks necessary. Aurora looked up at him, this man who had shown her what love could be: patient, respectful, healing. I love you, she said, the words emerging with surprising ease after months of holding them back. Afraid, joy transformed Finn's face. I love you too, Aurora. Have for a long time. This time when they kissed, it was Aurora who deepened it, her arms sliding around his neck as she pressed closer. Finn responded with careful passion, letting her set the pace, following her lead. When they finally parted, both breathing unsteadily, Finn rested his forehead against hers. I should go, he murmured reluctantly. It's getting late. Aurora nodded, though part of her wanted him to stay. That would come in time, she knew. They were building something precious, something worth protecting with proper foundations. Finn, she said as he reached for his hat. I was thinking, maybe we could plant some roses along the south wall, Catherine's favorite you mentioned once. Emotion welled in his eyes. You do that. She'll always be part of who you are, Aurora said simply. I wouldn't want to erase that. Finn gathered her close again. You are an extraordinary woman, Aurora Morgan. As spring warmed into summer, Aurora's cottage garden bloomed with vegetables, herbs, and Catherine's roses. She settled into teaching, discovering unexpected fulfillment in nurturing young minds. Her nightmares became less frequent, though they never disappeared entirely. Finn remained foreman at the double circle, riding to town several evenings a week to spend time with Aurora. Their courtship progressed naturally, without pressure or expectations. They spoke openly of their pasts, Catherine, Horace, the losses and pains that had shaped them, but increasingly, their conversations turned toward the future. On a perfect July evening, exactly 1 year after Aurora had attended the double circle gathering, Finn took her riding to a hillside overlooking the valley. A picnic blanket and basket awaited them, placed there earlier by Miguel. You planned this, Aurora said, smiling as she dismounted. Guilty, Finn admitted, helping her spread the blanket beneath a large pine tree. They ate and talked as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in spectacular colors. When Finn grew uncharacteristically quiet, Aurora nudged his shoulder gently. Something on your mind, Cowboy. He smiled at the nickname she'd only recently begun using. Just thinking about how much can change in a year. For the better, Aurora agreed, leaning against his shoulder. Finn took her hand, suddenly serious. Aurora, I know we've both carried wounds. We've learned to be careful with ourselves and each other, and I've tried to be patient to give you all the time and space you need. Her heart began to race. You have. The thing is, he continued, his voice low and earnest, I don't want to just visit you anymore. I want to build a life with you. A real life, a shared life. Aurora's throat tightened with emotion as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. I had this made, Finn said, opening it to reveal a delicate silver ring with a small pearl nestled in the setting. Nothing flashy. Just honest like what's between us. It's beautiful, Aurora whispered. Aurora Morgan, would you consider becoming Aurora Vance? Not today or tomorrow, but whenever you're ready. I'll wait as long as you need. Aurora looked at the man before her, this patient, honorable man who had taught her what love could be. The answer came without hesitation. Yes, she said simply. And I don't want to wait. We've both lost enough time to grief and fear. Finn's smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Are you sure? I've never been more certain of anything, Aurora replied, and realized it was true. The damaged, frightened woman who had ridden into Sloan a year ago wouldn't have recognized this version of herself, still healing, yes, but stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. They were married in September, with the entire town of Sloan in attendance. Mrs. Peterson wept openly as she adjusted Aurora's simple cream-colored dress and placed wildflowers in her hair. Your parents would be so proud, the older woman said, dabbing at her eyes, and I am too. So proud of the woman you've become. Miguel stood as Finn's best man, his normally stoic expression softened with genuine happiness for his friend. Sheriff Taylor gave the bride away, a role he accepted with gruff emotion when Aurora asked him. After the ceremony at the small church, the celebration moved to the double circle, where tables groaned with food and the barn was cleared for dancing. As twilight fell, Finn led Aurora away from the festivities to a quiet spot overlooking the ranch. Happy, he asked, his arm around her waist. More than I ever thought possible, she answered truthfully, and a little scared still. Finn nodded, understanding. Marriage isn't magic, we'll still have hard days, days when memories come back. But we'll face them together, Aurora said, echoing the promise he'd made her that night by the edge of town. Together, Finn agreed, kissing her softly. 3 months after their wedding, the Double Circle's owner, Mr. Hollister, made Finn an unexpected offer, the chance to buy the ranch on reasonable terms. Hollister was aging and his sons showed no interest in ranching. It's a risk, Finn admitted as they discussed it in their cottage. They had chosen to live in Aurora's home until spring when her school term would end. The payments would stretch us thin for years. But it's what you've always wanted, Aurora said, recognizing the light in his eyes. What about teaching? Your cottage? I wouldn't ask you to give those up. Aurora considered carefully. I love teaching, but I also love the ranch. Maybe I could teach the Hands children and any others nearby. Start a small school at Double Circle. The idea took root, and by spring, arrangements were made. They moved to the ranch house in April, bringing furniture from the cottage in Catherine's Roses, which Aurora carefully transplanted along the south wall of their new home. Life settled into new rhythms. Finn worked from sunrise to sunset building the ranch, while Aurora established a small school in a converted outbuilding for the children of Hands and neighboring homesteads. 3 days a week, she still rode into Sloan to assist at the town school, unwilling to completely abandon her students there. In their second year of marriage, Aurora discovered she was expecting a child. The news brought both joy and renewed fears. What if I can't protect them? She whispered one night, hand resting on her still flat stomach. What if I'm not whole enough to be a good mother? Finn gathered her close. You are the strongest, most loving person I know. Our child will be blessed to have you as their mother. But the nightmares, the memories, are part of you, not all of you, Finn said firmly. Our child will know a mother who survived and thrived despite everything. What greater legacy could you give them? As Aurora's body changed with the growing life inside her, she found unexpected healing. The kicks and movements of their child reinforced that her body, once a source of pain and shame, could create something miraculous. Catherine Rose Vance was born on a snowy December morning in 1878, named for Finn's first wife and Aurora's mother. She had Finn's blue eyes and Aurora's auburn hair, and from her first breath, she seemed to understand her mission of healing hearts that had once been broken. "She's perfect," Finn whispered, cradling his daughter with tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "She is," Aurora agreed, exhausted but filled with a fierce love she'd never imagined possible. As Catherine grew, so did the ranch and their family. 2 years after their daughter's birth, Aurora gave birth to twin boys James and Thomas, who brought joyful chaos to the household. The double circle prospered under Finn's careful management, becoming one of the most respected operations in the territory. Aurora's school expanded to accommodate more children as families settled in the region. She taught with passion and understanding, particularly attentive to children who seemed withdrawn or afraid, recognizing signs she knew too well. Life wasn't without challenges. Aurora still had occasional nightmares that left her trembling in Finn's arms. News of Horace Morgan's death in prison brought complicated emotions: relief, anger, a final severing of the past. The ranch faced drought years and harsh winters that tested their resources and resolve, but through it all, they faced every challenge together, just as they had promised. Their love deepened with each passing year, rooted in mutual respect and understanding of each other's scars and strengths. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they returned to the hillside where Finn had proposed. Their children remained at the ranch house with Mrs. Peterson, who had moved to the double circle after retiring from the boarding house. At 60, Catherine was a spirited girl on the verge of young womanhood, while the 8-year-old twins were inseparable partners in mischief. "Remember how afraid I was that day?" Aurora asked as they spread a blanket in the same spot under the pine tree. "Afraid to believe in happiness in future. You had reason to be cautious," Finn replied, settling beside her. At 41, his sandy hair was touched with gray at the temples, lines of laughter crinkling around his eyes. "We both did." Aurora leaned against his shoulder, as comfortable in his embrace now as breathing. "Thank you for your patience, for giving me time to heal." "We healed each other," Finn corrected gently. "Still are some days." The sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant golds and crimsons. Below them, the double circle spread across the valley: barns, corrals, bunkhouses, the school building, and their home at the center of it all. "Did you ever imagine this?" Aurora asked, gesturing toward their ranch, their life. "When you found me that day in the saloon, afraid of my own shadow," Finn smiled, his eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. "I saw a woman with extraordinary courage, even if she couldn't see it in herself yet." He took her hand, kissing the palm in a gesture that still made her heart flutter after 10 years. "I hoped we might find peace together. Never dreamed we'd find so much more." Aurora turned in his arms, cupping his beloved face between her palms. "I love you, Cowboy," she whispered, the words as true now as the first time she'd spoken them. "Thank you for healing with me." "I love you too," Finn replied, drawing her closer. "Always will." As they kissed on the hillside overlooking their home, Aurora Morgan Vance, once too damaged to imagine loving or being loved, gave silent thanks for second chances, for patience, for the man who had shown her that healing was possible when hearts worked together. Their story wasn't perfect. There were still scars, still occasional shadows, but they had built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts: a family, a home, a love strong enough to weather any storm. And in the end, that was all that mattered.